I'm the Brown Booktuber, and I read 52 books in 52 weeks, and I'm going to talk about all the books I read in 2022. These are going to be pretty quickie reviews, because God, I could go on for ages, so I'm trying to keep it succinct, and I'll put the books behind me, hopefully. So, let's start off, and I'll be referring to my Goodreads on my phone. You can follow me on Goodreads, and it can be in the description down below. So, the first book was Rifqa by Muhammad Al-Kurd. It was a combination of prose and poetry. Very interesting, very heart-wrenching. Muhammad Al-Kurd, obviously, is someone I follow in general. So, yes, very interesting. Pick it up if you can. And it goes towards a very great individual in my eye. The Strange Disappearance of a Bollywood Star, the Baby Ganesh Agency Investigation Number 3 by Wasim Khan. I remember talking about this when I first read it. I didn't mind it. It was fine. It wasn't that interesting to me. I think I've aged out of that kind of stuff for me personally. Up next is White Tears, Brown Scars, How White Feminism Betrays Women of Colour by Ruby Hamad. This is a book I think is absolute must read for everyone in the world. Pick this up. I think you should definitely read this. After that is Don't Let My Past Be Your Future, A Call to Arms by Harry Leslie Smith. This is, if you're really interested in British politics and what life was like in Britain for the working class and the poorest people in the country prior to the introduction of like the NHS and the rise of the Labour Party, it really hurt to read because this is a real man's account, and it hurts to see that it feels like the political class has betrayed this man in particular. Then we have Things That Can and Cannot Be Said by Arundhati Roy and John Cusack, the actor. I remember making a video on this. Really interesting. Some people will say this is conspiracy theories because it like tells you. There's a meme. I'll put the meme behind me if I can find it, but it's like the world. People have done the most outlandish stuff in this world, and saying it makes it sound like you're a conspiracy theorist. Then we have There Was a Country, A Personal History of Biafra by Chinua Achebe. One of Achebe's kind of autobiographical / historical books. Very interesting if you want to learn more about like African history, especially, you know, the area Achebe is from. Building on that is another Achebe book, A Man of the People. Again, it's kind of about politics from where Achebe is from in Africa, and it's like more of a personal story about it. You know, you go into the individual and the effects that politics have. Next, we have Notes of a Native Son by James Baldwin. Again, it's about James Baldwin and his experience as a black man and in Paris and the UK and the experiences of that. The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. This was my second time reading it. I kind of forgot the first time reading it how just scarring it is. It makes me, like, parts of it makes you feel yuck reading, but that's why it's so powerful. Tokyo Ueno Station by Miri Yu. This was also a hard read. I think a lot of my early books were hard reads, which is why as you get through the year, my books become lighter, I feel. It was a hard read. It's about homelessness in Tokyo. Yeah, that one was definitely hard. The Nothing by Hanif Qureshi. I have a love-hate relationship with Hanif Qureshi books. Some of them I like, some of them I don't. The Nothing was one I wasn't really a fan of. The Book of Tea by Kazuo Okakura, which I think is a book I already reviewed. It's a book about tea and the history of tea. It's actually quite interesting if you want to read it. And it was my copy is this nice little cute book which fits in your pocket. Capitalism, A Ghost Story by Arundhati Roy. Again, more Arundhati Roy, more kind of similar to that book she wrote with John Cusack, where people will think you're a conspiracy theorist, but this stuff is literally true and documented, and it's crazy. Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse. I feel like I spoke about this before as well, and I said it was very much a book of its time where I can understand it, and I don't know if I liked it as much, but I understood why people thought it was like a modern classic. Women and Gender in Islam, Historical Roots of Modern Debate by Layla Ahmed. Again, another interesting book if you're interested in Islamic culture and Islam and learning more about it than what you're told by people on TikTok or the internet. Read books. Books are good. Building on that, Science in Islam, History by Ehsan Massoud. Again, it tells you a lot more about the history of Islam and its relationship with science that many people in the community and outside of it seem to ignore. Silence by Shusaku Endo. Classic, very, very good, very interesting. Again, another hard read where I was like, oh, some of the stuff that's going on here makes me just hurt. I've not watched the movie. I should watch the movie. Maybe I'll do that this weekend. So the day before this goes out, maybe I'll watch that if it's on like Amazon or something. The 10 Loves of Mr. Nishino by Hiromi Kawakami. Love Hiromi Kawakami. This was actually really fun. It wasn't too deep. It did delve a little bit into the supernatural parts of her work, but it wasn't overwhelmed by that. Like, I think a book I'll be talking about soon in this list. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It's pretty good. It was like a 7 out of 10. A Rising Man, the first in the Sam Wyndham books by Abir Mukherjee. It just wasn't my cup of tea. It wasn't the kind of investigation story I liked. It was set in India, which was interesting, and it's an Indian author's view of what a white guy would think of like colonial India. So it was interesting, but just not my cup of tea, really. Death and the Penguin by Andrei Kurkov. I still haven't picked up the sequel to this because it really ended on a note where I'm like, where is this gonna go? And I want to see what happens to all of these characters, and so I do need to pick up the sequel to this. Poems for Palestine, a collection from Maher Masais. Again, I believe proceeds from this book also go towards Palestine, so I would recommend it. I'm probably not going to have a list of all the books in the description, but if I do, I'll put a note here. Nitro, The Incredible Rise and Inevitable Collapse of Ted Turner's WCW by Guy Evans. I said this in a TikTok I made. It is the best book on WCW history, I think. It is really good, really informative, and an enjoyable read that's less bogged down by statistics. Never Stop Shutting Up, a book of advice and other things you didn't ask for by Mike Falzone. I just like Mike Falzone. He's great, and I found this in a charity shop. How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney. Again, like really teaching you history of what's happened and the influences of our history. So when people say to you, oh, it's all in the past, it's not all in the past. It still affects us today. Record of a Night Too Brief by Hiromi Kawakami. It didn't help that I read this book on what I think is the hottest day ever recorded in the United Kingdom, like in a hospital as well, for personal reasons. It was like 42 degrees. I was sat in a hospital reading this. It's already trippy, but with all of that going on as well, it was insane to read. A Cat, a Man and Two Women by Junichiro Tanizaki. Very interesting. I like anything that's got a cat, I'm going to read the book, but very interesting look into relationships. Kantapura by Raja Rao, the first English written novel in India that really, went wide. It's about how the marches for Gandhi spread to the small village in South India. Very interesting about, people in India. Gachad Gorchad by Vivek Shanbag. An interesting look into Indian families, and it doesn't shy away from things like corruption and the dark side of interfamilial relationships. Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur. I think I made a video on this because I went into this being told Rupi Kaur isn't a very good poet. I don't know a lot about poetry. I don't super understand poetry, but the messaging behind the poems was really just... It does hurt your soul and you can feel it. Poetic form, it's not really something I know too much about. First Time in Space by Mark Powers, an Among Us novel, because I thought that would get me views. So I read a book about Among Us and thought I'd make a video about it. It did really poorly, so... We Should All Be Feminists by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Really is very short. I think I listened to this whilst I was working one day. Very interesting. It's a very good book to have. It's very interesting. It's very, very short, so I'd pick it up. A Study in Scarlet, Sherlock Holmes 2 by Arthur Conan Doyle. I don't think I'd read any Sherlock Holmes, so I thought I'd check one out. Yeah, it was fine. You know, it was Sherlock Holmes. You know, it's Human Acts by Han Kang. Han Kang books are very difficult to read, not in the sense that they're hard to get through, but she does touch on very, like, harsh subjects which, you know, it's not like, oh yeah, I want a nice read today, I'm going to read a Han Kang book. The Man Who Died Twice by Richard Osman. I made a whole video on this, I believe. It was fine. Like, I think I preferred the first one. And I think people were like, oh, this one's way better. I prefer the first one. Older Brother by Mahir Guven. I didn't like this book. Just didn't like it. Uprising in Pakistan, How to Bring Down a Dictatorship by Tariq Ali. Very interesting. Pakistani history, Pakistani politics. An Artist of the Floating World by Kazuo Ishiguro. I think this was the first book I read last year where it was like, it wasn't too sad, it wasn't like too emotionally gripping, but it was like a very interesting story. And some of the stuff they do discuss is sad and it is upsetting, but it's not like doing so to make you upset. It is just part of the character's journey. And I think this was the point in the year I was like, I need to lay off the really hurtful, sad books. This makes me not want to read. Marx by John Moxley. It's a wrestler's autobiography. It was interesting. I enjoyed it. The Sign of Four, Sherlock Holmes 2, Arthur Conan Doyle. I listened to this. I didn't like the company that I listened to it from. It was like, the voice actors weren't very good. I preferred the first book when it's just one guy reading everyone's voices. The voice actors they used for the second book wasn't very good. But the story was interesting enough. I mean, I think it's more interesting than A Study in Scarlet, personally. Although, it is actually, obviously they cover it in the Robert Downey Jr. movie, so. Star Wars Visions, Ronin, by Emma Maiko Kandon. I'm pretty sure I mentioned this in my books you should buy for Christmas. This is a really fun, enjoyable book as a Star Wars fan. A New Formation, How Black Footballers Shaped the Modern Game. Made a video on this. No one watched it, but I think it is incredibly important and incredibly interesting book if you want to learn about football and more so like race relations through sports, because politics and sports are inextricably linked. Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. Again, very, very interesting, very deep, very similar to actually more books I read later on, but it's about the experience of being like a minority in the US. Zecora by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, another short story this time, again talking about the struggles of a black woman and relationships and her relationship with her, a boyfriend and her family and what it's like being older and getting older and having a family. Again, really, really, this was a hard-hitting one. I read it on a train journey in Sydney. So, Before the Coffee Gets Cold, Tales from the Cafe, the second book in the Before the Coffee Gets Cold series. This one I listened to on a plane because I didn't want to read on the plane, so I downloaded it. It was really good. It did what I wanted it to do. It expanded on the lore of Before the Coffee Gets Cold and really taught you more about these characters. I think I spoke about it in a video. Black Skin, White Masks by Frantz Fanon. Frantz Fanon is kind of must read if you are a person who likes to talk about or learn about even decolonialism, how to decolonize oneself and your surroundings, and understanding the effects of racism and colonialism. The Bullet That Missed, Thursday Murder Club 3. I like this one more than the second one. Miyazaki World, A World in Art. Again, I think I've spoken about this. If you're a Miyazaki fan, a must read. A Bookshop in Algiers by Hatouthur Adimi. Very interesting, very... The first book I think I read on this channel about like North Africa, or set in North Africa. So yeah, very interesting. And obviously it's set on the backdrop of like Algeria post independence and during the independence fight. Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. I get it, it's a classic, and I get the whole point of Catch-22, that it's repetitive, but this book was very repetitive. It was interesting, there were interesting characters, but it was so repetitive, and I know that's the point, but I just couldn't handle it. The Nakano Thrift Shop by Hiromi Kawakami. One of Kawakami's books, more so like Strange Weather in Tokyo, where it's less supernaturally, a little bit more normal slice of life. I enjoyed it. On Friday comes Football Revolution in the Middle East and the Road to Qatar by James Montague. This is a very, very interesting book about politics in football and the influence of politics in football, the influence of politics in the Middle East and how it's used by dictators or not used by dictators. So interesting how it's used to like pink wash or sports wash even countries. Some of the takes James has I don't fully agree with, but super interesting. Probably one of the most interesting books I read this last year. I did read it at the very end of last year though. And we come to the last book, Before Your Memory Fades, the third book in the Before Your Coffee Gets Cold series by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. It did what I wanted it to do. It furthered the lore and the understanding of the coffee shop, and it just took it even deeper. I think there's a fourth book planned, so looking forward to that. And yeah, that's it. That's all 52 books I read in 2022. I'm not reading 52 books in 2023. I set 26 as my target. I might read more than that, but I can't. I didn't enjoy reading the books as much as I could have because I tried to read them. I tried to get through all of them, and it hindered the experience. It made me not want to read books. Like, I read a bulk of my books in the first half of the year, and then the second half I had to slow down because I was like, this isn't fun for me. I'm not enjoying reading these books. But let me know how many books you read in 2023 in the comments down below. Remember to like, subscribe, share the video with a friend or family member, and hey, let's have a great year of reading in 2023. Please comment down below the kind of videos you want me to make. Do you want me to review newer books? I'm obviously going to focus most of my books around Asia and Africa, but let me know down below. Hey, really great book this year. Many great books this year. Just read loads this year.